Welcome to Eye of the Storm. Never forget that we are the storm because we're standing together, organizing a revolutionary movement. And I have a very special guest in
Oh,
crime
all right. Hey, welcome back.
partner back with me today. John X-Ray, Johnny X-Ray, John Anaya is here to talk about his journey fighting for his son. And he's gone from the East Coast to the West. And now he is in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol with dealing with the trifecta of the legal process. So welcome back, John.
Thank you, Audra. It's awesome to see you again. We have returned to the Capitol. I haven't left, but when I got here, this is where we started when we stumbled upon this potential path for due process and hope for some of the other self-represented litigants.
That's right. And it's so good to have you back, brother, because,
Thank you.
Fighting crime is, very tough. And, fighting for children is so paramount. So I'm so glad that you're here and back today to share just your journey and what you've really gone through so you can help other parents, fight to get their children back as well. And what a day to do it. But before we get into all of that, let's bring our Heavenly Father into the mix. Will you do that for us?
Well, I was going to pray. How about you pray? And I'll just take a knee, sister. How about?
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you and as always, just thank you for all the many praise, blessings and grace that you give us. And we just ask that you would guide us through this show, Father, and just put a hedge of protection around John as he is right in the lion's den, Father, and fighting so much, egregious things that are taking place. And we just ask that you would, lead this to bring this to other parents so that it can lead them to finding tools and resources that they can use, Father, to return their children back home to them as well and put them in a place of protection. And as we are going through all of this, we just ask that you put a hedge of protection around all of the children that are suffering and all of the parents as well, Father, and help these families to be reunited because it is so important. We know this is a spiritual battle and that, this is spiritual wickedness that is running rampant and children are our future. And so if we need to course correct, Father, this is the way to do it. And so we just ask that you would guide us through that, lead us in your light, and just continue to guide John as he is there in Washington, D.C., and just lead him to the victory that you have laid out before him, Father. And so we just ask that you would bless all those that are listening and those that aren't. And in your precious name, Jesus, amen.
Blessings to all of you and your families out there. And thank you for joining us on this very nice and chilly cold evening here. As Audra said, we have battled actually from West Coast to East, but the battle itself, it wages back and forth from Washington, D.C. and the Capitol in the Eastern District of Virginia, all the way to the wine country in Napa, California. I ended up here. I came here on behalf of a myriad of families and parents that are weathering the storm, and that it is the self-represented legal battle. Many people don't have the money or the ability to afford an attorney or effective representation. So many people are taking up the task, the duty, as it were, to self-represent and fight and learn. And it is it's a very consumptuous battle for anybody. And the last time I was here, I actually came here in 2024. I drove all the way from Napa. My brother had passed away in Georgia, so my path was deviated that way initially. Then I continued on to North Carolina, and from North Carolina up into Virginia, and then made my way here to the Capitol, went to the DOJ, the FBI building, and then here to the Senate building, over here to the left. And I was exhausted, so I just pulled into a handicapped parking space and tried to catch some shut-eye. And ironically, I had been struck by somebody an inebriated driver. And most people would think that that's a horrible thing, but it was a blessing from God. It was what needed to happen to put me here to be able to fight this battle in so many ways. And when I stopped in Virginia, I went to go visit with an Army brother, and his mother has a prayer house in where they live in Virginia, and she lives in Arizona, but she has dedicated her house to the Lord where anybody can go in there and pray or give testimony. And we went there that day, and I got on my knees and I begged for God's help. I said, Jesus, please help me. Please help me protect my son. You can see through into my heart. I cannot lie. You can't lie to God. You know, if you're trying to, you can lie to yourselves, you can lie to other people, but you can't lie to God. And so I said, you know, I'll help other people. I'll fight for other people. And my Army brother was to the right of me. He was on his knees. It was a powerful moment. And the young lady from North Carolina, and not long thereafter, like I said, I was struck here in DC. It was like God said, hey, your application was accepted. And of course, the most unorthodox way, somebody crashed into me. But it was, I don't know how to say this without people thinking, John, how could that be? But it was 100% the power of God that happened to me right there. Because if you took 6 problems, that took care of 5 of them right there. And it put me here to be able to really delve into Washington, D.C., and the interlocking with so many other people like yourself and other self-represented people that are out there, parents, aunts, uncles, advocates that share acumen. And so I was like, well, let me put this to the test. And that's what I was, our first interview, that was what is it about, was we found potential paths that may be more conducive for people, because a lot of people want to get their case into the United States Supreme Court, but it's a very small window to get in there. And it's costly, and it requires a lot of acumen just to even establish jurisdiction from your own state. You have to go through the appellate process and then request a review to your state Supreme Court before you can even request a writ of certiorari to SCOTUS. But we have achieved that. The last time I was here, I was still navigating the appeals process, and I am now properly before the United States Supreme Court. My case has not yet been docketed. It's been submitted. It was returned to me, and I had to cure. I have cured, and I'm waiting for response from Honorable Justice John Roberts and the others for my request for stay and request for certiorari to the United States Supreme Court. My ask is for the United States Supreme Court to make the decision whether or not the family court in Napa has abused their discretion and their power and violated national security under 18 USC 2339 Bravo, which is providing material support to FTOs. And after I arrived here in DC, there was an election, there was a new president, new administration. And on the very first day, they put an executive order into place that added various groups to the already existing list of security global threat groups and FTOs, which are foreign terrorist organizations. They added several cartels and Tren de Anagua, Mara Salvatrucha, different transnational gangs. And so that's something that has been sought for quite some time. Mitt Romney has a large portion of his family that lives in Mexico, and he was trying to achieve that many moons ago. Lindsey Graham, when there was a few Americans were harmed in El Paso, I think it was, or Juarez, and Lindsey Graham made the same ask to try to change the cartels over to those security threat groups. Because what that does is it's a game changer. Then it's like the CIA, Tier 1 operators, etc. So my request to the Supreme Court is that they take a look at what happened in Napa and make the decision as to whether the conduct of the court there is providing material support. Because I'm a former CHS for the DOJ. I was married when I was in the Army to a woman whose father would be taken by force from his home in San Carlos and dispatched by the cartel. And between 2008 and 2010, I would volunteer to the United States Department of Justice to prefer action on behalf of the United States. So that when that takes place, there's protections involved like 19 CFR 161.15, where you're not even supposed to be able to FOIA that information. Or if you were to enter into a courtroom, it's not for public consumption. It does not benefit the public to have that information. So there's laws, case law, guidelines, California Evidence Code 1041 through 1043 subsection Delta. There's a myriad of protections that are in place to ensure the safety of certain individuals. And that was pressed aside in the county of Napa, despite their knowledge of that. and it was actually abused as a means to extract information to be relayed to FTOs, and it started this war, this legal battle between myself and the county of Napa, and unfortunately, it has expanded all the way across the country to the Eastern District of Virginia, Richmond. I have preferred a 42 USC 1983 Civil RICO. I'm not sure if I had already preferred it the last time we spoke.
Right. I don't think so, but I'm not positive. I'm not
Okay.
positive. I apologize.
And I have expanded from Eastern District of Virginia here to Washington, D.C., to the district court in D.C., a writ of mandamus with myself and the United States Department of Justice. I'm not preferring action against the DOJ as them have done me harm. It's more of an ask for them to prefer action against the people who have done me harm. It's not a lawsuit for money. It's more of a ministerial duty that was failed under the last administration. And I have asked the new leadership, Honorable Patel, Honorable Bondi, Honorable Janine Pirro, to take the evidence and prefer action against the people who willfully and intentionally place myself and my family and others in harm's way. And so that is an active case here in DC. And so I've created something of a trifecta of legal strength. You know, the 42 USC 1983 Civil RICO out of the Eastern District of Virginia, the 2 DC cases here that's active, myself and the DOJ are rocking and rolling. And then I've requested the United States Supreme Court to discharge or to accept my writ of certiorari. And it's all directed from here all the way back to the West Coast. And that's what I learned when I came here by engaging with other self-represented litigants. Some of them were saying that you can access the Supreme Court through a more conducive path. And they weren't quite right, but they weren't wrong either. And so I came here, I started going places, I started digging, asking questions, I started learning. And that's when I realized you can establish jurisdiction here in the Capitol from other places in America. It's a unique dynamic that DC controls the country. The country doesn't necessarily control DC. So
Right.
we have federal buildings, federal employees, and they are the highest echelon of justice, where the laws are made. This is as high as it gets. So if you have requested from your state or your county, many people have asked for protection or redress and been left they've been left not whole. So those who elevated their complaints or requests for assistance or protection to the DOJ, to the HHS, IRS, or the EPA, well, that initiates the duty here.
Right.
And under the last administration, unfortunately, many people were filing complaints to HHS and were getting a rejection letter from somebody who was identifying themselves as the Inspector General. And in that rejection, it establishes the jurisdiction here because it happened here. And to get jurisdiction here is something, it's unique. You either have to live here, the incident had to happen here, but because these are federal buildings, federal employees, there's a pathway. And I've met other Americans thus far from San Diego and Colorado and different places that are actively Virginia. They're actually have action preferred here. So we were rubbing shoulders with one another and seeing what we can learn. I've learned quite a bit. The DC court has an appellate circuit, and it's one stone's throw away from SCOTUS. And so it's more, I'd say, accessible than the Supreme Court because, let's face it, the docket for the Supreme Court is not easy to get on that docket. Thus far, we've had one self-represented litigant, Wade Reeves out of Oklahoma, who's also battling against California. Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta jumped into his appeal, and he preferred action against them. He sued them in federal court from Oklahoma, and they sicked a whole bunch of attorneys on him, and he's been battling ever since. And so he's actually filed 2 writs of certiorari, one for Oklahoma and one for California, and he's actually been docketed. And so
That's great.
we are learning.
Yes, that's fantastic. And so, what are some tips if there's, parents that are kind of just getting started, or, finding that there are, things they can do to redress their grievances. What would you kind of recommend how they, start out?
Number one, whether you're represented or not, study, 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 study.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of parents that I've met that were actually done further harm by ineffective counsel. And so if we don't know when counsel is ineffective, then we're at a disadvantage. Because if your attorney's not properly objecting and you don't know if you don't know when a proper objection or him responding to objections, that's your first chance for an appeal right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a record, if you're fortunate enough to establish a record through a court reporter or otherwise, and it goes to an appeals court, they're going to say, well, right there, you could have objected. Sorry, we can't do nothing for you. So it's important to study. And there's a lot of resources on YouTube, and there's other self-represented litigants that are putting information out to help people. And I'm actually here in DC right now. Some folks converged from Maine and from California, that there's folks that are putting together apps that they're engineered and geared to help the self-represented litigants that are navigating this battle, so that you'll be able to put your information in there. It'll be able to scan it for RICO violations, for ADA violations. There's a lot going on right now, and leadership is actually proactive in this. They've reached out to some of these creators of the tech and the technology, and they're trying to work with them. And so that's actually why I'm here today. I accompanied somebody to come on this journey. And another thing that I think is important as far as being a self-represented litigant, oh gosh, artificial intelligence. I just got to call it for what it is. Until I didn't know how to use the AI or what the AI was until I got out here. And I actually met a parent through TikTok and through another platform that that I learned how to use one, and it was a game changer. But learning how to use it effectively is the first obstacle. So we hope that other parents and people that would know how to use it and find the right platform, because each one has a different attribute and a different strength. And so what we've done is, because it can be costly, we'll have one parent use one AI platform and another use a different one, and then we'll send it to the next person. We relay it. They'll run the document through that one. Then we send it to another one. So you can get a really good finished product, because each one will apply its strength and or its weaknesses. And at the end, you can get some pretty powerful stuff.
Right. Well, and don't you think, though, that's why educating yourself is important as well, so that you're not relying completely on that for doing the task. And then because you're not seeing the errors that it could make or different things like that. It's like still, be very apt to learn about what you're doing, so that you have a greater understanding. But that's a tool that's great to use for if you're like, once you're at a point where you need it to like kind of hone in on some data and like find certain things, right? It's like
to cite case law points and authorities. It's excellent because just having the AI will not help you at oral arguments. If you're in the courtroom and an audible is thrown at you, if you don't understand the fundamentals, if you don't study what the rules of your local court are, the state, you can be at a disadvantage, because they may throw something at you and you're dependent on the script that's been given to you by the AI, and it could go very bad really quick. And that's how it was in the beginning. I was actually paying for what's called assisted legal, where an attorney will help you. They go do the research and then they give it to you, but you got to do the heavy lifting. And I was asking for them to come into the courtroom for me on special appearance, and they wouldn't do it. And so when I would go in there, I was having to battle against a licensed, seasoned attorney. And so they would throw things that weren't in my documentation and I didn't know. And it opened up a door for them to manipulate the self-represented litigant, because we don't know the case law points and authorities, and it may not even be applicable or relative, or it might not even be the right case law points and authorities. But again, if you don't know that and you don't object or present a stronger argument, a more controlling precedent, you may be, again, you can get mowed over. So study, study, study. I always tell people, start off with objections. Learn about the objections, the hearsay. What is hearsay? What are the exceptions to hearsay? Learn those objections. Whether you use them or an attorney does, it'll benefit you because you can say, hey, ain't you supposed to be objecting right now? What's
Mhm.
going on?
Right. Well, and don't you think that's why it'd be important? Because I know they don't provide court reporters, and you need something where you're going to have a record. Because I think that's why, they bank on all of these things, people being ignorant of the law so that they can railroad you when you go in there if you do want to represent yourself, right?
Yes.
And otherwise, you have an attorney who's useless and they're not going to do anything for you. But if you have even the record of that, you can go back to it and make sure that you have, a transcript, something that you can use for an appeal for whatever it is. It's like they try and, obfuscate and hide things by not providing things like that. When any other time, I feel like in any other courts, they really want to have their record. Like, but in these, I feel like when we're dealing with children and families, like they just don't want people to know what's going on. And so when you have a record of that, I think it can be very useful in your pursuit to do what you're doing, or just, hold the people accountable as well.
That's the ideal next point to go to, like you said, jurisdiction and the record. Either create the record. If you're in the courtroom and something wasn't said, if it wasn't expressed in the minutes, file a declaration and make sure you get it in there. Because if they don't contest it within a certain amount of time, because litigants are going in there and they're asking, may the record reflect, and it's not being reflected. And what that does is it's prejudicial to the self-represented litigant because it may be something that they need to be part of the record.
Right.
And that's a denial of due process, because if you need to appeal because something went wrong, if there is no record, you have nothing. And then the appeals court will give deference to the lower court, and you're caught in this terrible conundrum. And so creating the record is so important because, oh gosh, if you have no record, you have nothing. And in California, under CRC 1.100 for people who have disabilities, you can make requests, a reasonable request for things like PTSD to record, but they are denying people these ADA accommodation requests. And if you do have a fee waiver, they are supposed to provide a court reporter, at least in California, at no cost to the litigant. But then what happens is we've had folks who did have a record. There was a court reporter, and then they faced obstacles with that. Things disappear from the record, or they're delayed on getting the record so that the appeals process gets dragged out further. And I was speaking to Wade Reeves, who, like I said, he's docketed right now with the Supreme Court. His friend is a private investigator, and he told him, look, and I'm going to relay this to everybody. If you plan to appeal, do not go tell them first. Have somebody else go and get your entire clerk file. Get it all first. And this investigator, that's what he does for a living. And he said, the reason why, and this is something that I'm sure many of us experience, when you go to appeal, things start conveniently disappearing. And we've stumbled on some alarming realities, that a page here, a page there, something, or when it goes from the superior court to the appellate court, somehow it's not there. Or when the appellate court needs to press it forward, it can also disappear. So make sure before you file your appeal that you go send somebody to get that, because when you do, I'm not making accusations, but hey, things conveniently seem to disappear. And I've heard that from folks all over the country, because Wade, his case is out of California, but he's also filed in Oklahoma. And so, yes, the record, folks, if you have no record, you have no redress. Number 3, standard of review. It's one of your most important focal points. Standard of review. You got abuse of discretion, insufficient evidence, and de novo. De novo is your strongest standard of review. And sometimes people will get caught up in the insufficient evidence or abuse of discretion, but those are very hard to achieve because deference is often given to the court. But when it's de novo, where the law was translated incorrectly or improperly, you have a better chance at an appeal. We've unfortunately had some very interesting circumstances that litigants, even with the de novo standard, being denied when they've cited what's called a controlling precedent, like in remarriage of Knox 2022. That's the controlling precedent in the state of California relative to needs-based attorney's fees. And the legislature was changed to remove judicial discretion from the arbiters because they didn't want people going in there in cases being decided on who makes more money. They wanted it to be resolved based on the merits of the case. So what they did was they modified that and removed judicial discretion. And if somebody makes a request for needs-based attorney's fees and there is a clear disparity of income and there is available funds and they have made the request, it's mandatory. And that was solidified in the in remarriage of Knox, where she was forced to go through a trial without an attorney when she had made the proper request. And so when she appealed 3 years later at the end of the trial, she was made whole by a reversal. But there's people, that's part of my request to the United States Supreme Court too, that they delve into the needs-based attorney's fees and ADA violations and weaponization of protection measures like the PC 1368 and the vexatious litigant. Both of those were meant to protect, and somehow they've been turned into weapons for other folks. So that's part of my ask to the court here. But we've had some really, really good litigants go all the way to oral arguments, and they have, I would say, they've outclassed and outperformed paid attorneys at times, and still were just mowed over. And it gives the impression that they perceive the self-represented litigant potentially as a threat to the money or the profit. But many of the people that are doing this on their own are not the client base because they don't have the money to begin with. But if people can do this on their own, perhaps they see that just as a threat that there won't be a need. And people that are willing to and able to speak their mind as opposed to be submissive to the court because they're subservient to the bar, they're not going to like that, you know. And so
it's getting in the way
in the hearings.
Go ahead.
That's another thing I want to recommend. Show up early, stay late. People need to show up to the court, whether it's on Zoom or in person, and just sit there and observe. Because you're going to see the same attorneys, the same guardian ad litems, the same judges, and you may strike gold because you may hear them say something to one person, write down that person's name, go meet that person, exchange information on your cases. It could be valuable and helpful, but you can also write down that, okay, the judge did this on one day, but they did something different in my case. So you can show the judicial bias or even the appearance of bias. And we're showing up to the appeals oral argument and learning so much because appeals attorneys are like $20,000. It's a specialization within law and it's extremely expensive. So if you can just sit there and listen to paid attorneys argue on behalf of their client, you could be writing down what they're saying, whatever case law points and authorities that they're citing, the arguments they make, and then just duplicate those arguments. But it's alarming though, because we are seeing people achieve a better argument and still being mowed over.
Correct.
And that's where a lot of people are losing hope because they're going in there with their heart open and the belief, like a lot of us are ex-military and I've spoke to others and we go in there and we're standing at attention and we're showing respect to the court. And then things go awry when it's like, wait a second, I believed in the Constitution. I have brothers that never came home defending and honoring their oath to the Constitution. And then I go into a courtroom with like, okay, well, this is where it's all at right here. And then when that doesn't happen, it's a double slap in the face.
It is, but it's also, you know, at that point kind of exposing that part too, showing that like, you know, you can do all of these things and, you know, they're still, it's because, you know, like anytime someone's a threat to whatever this is, right? Like because I would consider this also child trafficking. It's like you can't get in the way of that, and they want just the business to go as usual. So anybody that's going to come in, it's like you could be, as good as or better than those individuals, and it's like you're saying, it doesn't necessarily matter. But I feel like finding that out is also a good thing, because then we can find other avenues, if that's the case, to go down, right? It's like, but you have to exercise that to see. And if they're the ones that are supposed to be taking care of it, then we need to figure out why they're not. Where are they profiting from, not doing that, not allowing people to actually have a fair trial?
And that's usually an indication. I tell folks, like, look, if you go in there and you make I learned that through this process too, watching the YouTube videos. There was this attorney, and he was explaining that, the blindfolded lady with the scales, that's not what people think it is. What that means is she has to listen to who has the better argument. And if we don't have the acumen or the experience, an attorney's going to speak in their language, so they may outweigh us. But if you're tipping the scale in your direction and you're still getting mowed over, that's when you know something's wrong, folks. And it happens more often than people think. I had no idea that this stuff was going on. I was blind to the fact. I was one of those people too that thought that, no, man, if something went wrong, there must be something to it. And now I realize all it takes is somebody being friend to the court. We had one gentleman who he was in a divorce, and his wife's father went and got a job at the court in the same courtroom. And it just went downhill for him all the way. And most people, that's a huge obstacle that we're facing right now, is trying to get people to even believe that this stuff can happen. And It can happen anybody. Yesterday I was with a young lady, former Air Force, MP, former law enforcement here. It happened to her. Her son was put on a MAC flight and taken to another country in Japan. He was abused there, and it was reported to the FAP, the FAP, and they didn't tell her. She only learned about it inadvertently and through conversation with him. And then her son was taken to Texas, and the father left him there, went to Iraq, and then he also went to Korea, and he was lying to the military saying that his son was in Japan still so that he could collect BAH. And she came forward about a lot of stuff, and she became targeted. She's former military, former law enforcement, and she was actually taken into custody here in D.C. at gunpoint and then transferred up to Baltimore to the very jail that she works for as a law enforcement officer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking story. And she's one of the litigants that are here fighting tooth and nail in the D.C. court, also in Baltimore, just trying to find some redress and some justice. We have people from all over. Some of the stories that you'll hear, it just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. But it all starts off down there in the Superior Court. Right. That's the first spot that it starts, in San Diego and different places.
Well, and like you're saying, so many people don't necessarily believe, because when you would talk about it, it's like, yeah, right. You know what I mean? No way. I mean, and that's where I find, like, at any point, because a lot of people even just say with CPS, right? They have a hard time understanding that Child Protective Services, no longer called that, but that's the, name, that they are doing what they're supposed to. But then you go into the family court side, and it's just as egregious. It's just a little bit different, right? But it's like still hard to wrap your head around. But anybody could have their life affected by this, because if anybody's going through a custody battle, a divorce, anything like that, it's like, you don't know that this can't happen to you. And so it's so important to share this kind of stuff so that people can start to go, even the ones that have experienced it, go, I'm not alone. Because I feel like everyone feels like they're alone, because who wants to talk about this kind of stuff? And they know that. I mean, it's not something where you're like happy about it. Like you're like, I just got a new Ferrari. You know what I mean? And you want to tell everybody in the world. It's like everyone wants to keep it kind of quiet, because it's not something that you can be proud of and be like, yeah, this is happening. And so in that, everyone kind of gets in this place where they feel like nobody else is experiencing it. And when they start to see that anybody can experience it, and there's people that you would never think that would experience it, then you start to go, okay. And we can start to give, like, tools for people to, because if it can happen to you, you better want to know what to do. And they bank off of no one knowing what to do. And so the more we share it with people, it's like you can come together and actually, make a difference and not just be there fighting alone. And especially I think with people who have an attorney who's really crappy or whatever, you don't necessarily know that they are. Like, you kind of have that feeling like, I feel like they're not doing, but when you see and you can
Until
talk
it's
to
too
other
late.
people. Yes, right.
Yeah.
But then when you can hear it from other people, you're like, oh my gosh, they aren't doing what they're supposed to. This is not right. You know what I mean? Like, you don't
You
feel
can see
like,
the red flags. If you know what to look for, if other people share the information and it's happening, you can catch it in real time and say,
yeah,
"Hey, this sounds a whole lot like about what I heard yesterday." One of the fathers, um, he said something. He says, "This makes you so that you're alone inside your own head. You can be surrounded by 15, 20 people, but you're alone inside your own mind, because wherever you're at, this is where your mind is at and where your heart's at. And people don't want to impose on other folks, so they
right,
isolate themselves, and it's an extra layer of harm and suffrage that they endure. And people just want to people don't understand. It's not their fault. They're just doing their
right,
best to console. Like, oh well, when the kid's old enough and they'll know who did. It's like
right.
that there's people that are fighting to protect their children's lives right now, and that may seem like just a blanket statement to some people, but in many cases it's just that. It's not hyperbolic, it's not
Uh,
exaggeration.
right.
Some people truly are seeking to protect their child from harm.
Absolutely. Well, even because many women, even like have nearly been killed by their, partners, and trying to protect their children from them as well. And they go into their hands. So it's like, there's so much suffering and so many people. It's horrible to think that you can isolate yourself like that and feel so alone in such a world of, there's so many people out there, that are experiencing it. And this is why I think it's so important for us to talk about this and like give tools. Do you recommend, people going and, filing complaints along the way of like things that are taking place so that there is a
You
record of
almost
that?
have to. You almost have to. And sometimes there's folks that are discouraging people to not do that because they're saying it's not going to work, it's nothing's going to happen. But if you don't, when you try to get to the next step where you could get some effective help, they'll say, "Oh, you didn't do this, and that." So
Right.
I've met people that have came here or to other courts, and the reason why they were rejected is because they say, "Well, you could have done X, Y, and Z, and you didn't, so we must send you back." And so it's a kick in the pants sometimes
Yeah.
to be rejected, and you file here and you file there, but it sometimes it's a necessary evil to get to that next step.
Well, and
And
it's creating a paper trail. You know what I mean?
yes, that way you can say, no, I've exhausted every other remedy to get here to the Supreme Court or to the federal courts. They want to know that you had nowhere else to go. It actually helps you that you're saying jurisdiction is proper here because I've gone everywhere else and there is nowhere left, and the federal is preserved. Um, Speaking of, I don't know if you heard about what happened in Napa County. There was a case where the grandmother and the father, I think he was in custody, and the grandmother was begging for Napa County to go check up on her granddaughter. They failed to do so, and the mother and the boyfriend had dispatched the young girl and had her in a freezer. And it was the largest settlement in Napa County history. Nobody cares about money when it comes to loss of human life,
Was
but
that just recent? I almost feel like I heard about
it
that, but I
was.
didn't realize.
Well, there's another case that's similar. That's why I was starting with the Casey
Right.
Slusher. And then there was a father and a mother, both had substance abuse issues. That was more recent, where the father was asking, please don't let the mother go over here, or let our child go over to visits where the mother is. I have concerns. And the child passed away to a fentanyl exposure, and they charged the mother. Somehow the father was arrested and charged, and he was placed in the Napa County jail, and 3 men tried to take his life because of the charge, even though he had asked for Napa County to not let the child go over to where the mother's was.
It doesn't matter. His papers said that, and that's what they go by.
Well, that's the bizarre thing is, why'd they put him in population? And if you go to the Casey Slusher case, that $5 million is not covered by insurance because Napa's insurance policy doesn't cover wrongdoing to that effect. So it would have to come out of the general fund. And $5 million is a lot to come from Napa County if that money is not ready to go. And
Right.
so there's concerns by some people. Did they intentionally put that father in population knowing that he would be attacked because of the nature of the charge so
Right.
that they would not have to worry about another lawsuit like the Casey Slusher case? And it just begs the question, why the heck did they do that? And that's another big ask right here to the United States Supreme Court and to the DOJ that we're asking them to really to zoom in onto the county and are they abusing the machinery of justice to silence litigants because they present a liability?
Right.
And I think that could be anywhere in California that we stumbled upon insurance policies that do not cover wrongdoing like fraud or harm done by the county itself to taxpayers. The taxpayers pay for the insurance policy, but if harm is done to them by somebody that works for the county, that insurance policy doesn't cover them. And so are they abusing the machinery to slide aside liability is what our concern is. That's one of our concerns and requests to the DOJ.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, it is it's just unbelievable the things that, we even have to talk about this. And, but, what are some other tips? I mean, I know you're probably getting cold, so I don't want to make you stand out there forever, but what else can we, tell our viewers, things that you would like to, I mean, as far as, kind of when you start out filing, like you're saying, use the, like AI and things like that, but educate yourself. What would you recommend filing first if somebody's kind of gone and they have, made complaints, gotten nowhere, because we know that's what happens. But still, again, the point would be to have a paper trail of showing that nothing has taken place. But what would you say the next first step would be as far as like filing and going to where you're at now?
Well, it's complex. You have to have a final order. And what's happening with some litigants is they're not giving them a final order, or they're not performing what's called the order after hearing. So it keeps them kind of in limbo. And so parents are being denied that ability to even appeal. And that's alarming because you can appeal down at the county level and you can appeal at the state. But if you're actively in court and you make a request for like an ADA accommodation and you're denied, I would highly recommend going to the appellate court on that to see if you can get a mandamus from the appeals court or the Supreme Court to compel the lower court to do what they must. One of the things that we're navigating right now that we didn't know for a long time until recently is when folks are seeking to disqualify the judges, there's a process that they have not told us about. A lot of people are just being denied, and that ain't how it's supposed to go. I called the Judicial Council, not the Commission for Judicial Appointments, but the Judicial Council, who puts out the bench guides and the guidance for these judges, and they validated it. They said, no, you're right. That's how it's supposed to go. So when you are trying to disqualify a biased judge, there's a process. You have to put the allegations line by line. You have to serve it on the court either to the officer of the court or to the judge's quarters. It depends on your county. Once that happens, they're supposed to give you 10 different judges, and you're supposed to go back and forth like a voir dire process to come to an agreement to choose an external judge from another county. And if you can't come to that agreement, then it goes to the Judicial Council and they select a judge. They're not doing that. I just had that happen recently. They send it over to
Right.
First, they just deny you and don't tell you nothing. And then we learned, we filed, they responded properly, but they didn't send the list of 10 judges. And instead they picked the judge, more than likely one of their buddies from a neighboring county, an adjacent county. And then that ain't how it's supposed to go. So
Right.
now I'm in that process. I'm going to have to press back. I already put together a letter to the CEO of the court. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you get everything in writing. Don't fall for the phone call. Reach out every day that you go. If people aren't allowed into the Zoom to observe, make a complaint with the CEO or the court admin. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I'm a little bit under the weather if you can't hear it in my tone. Um, if you don't make those you got to establish that record, and you got to stay on them, and you got to have people show up to court. If you have a church, if you're part of a congregation, that should be your first line of defense. They should be filling those seats in that courtroom and observing right there. The judge should see that this person has family, has a community within their church, and they're here on behalf of their faith.
Mhm.
And that's a powerful message when an arbiter may be thinking about doing something, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's one thing when there's nobody in there, but you got
Right.
them seats filled with your congregation. They're going to be like, well, I don't want to do this in front of, they may go to the same church. You never know.
Watching you, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like,
Yes, ma'am.
all eyes. Because they like to pretend, they like to do things behind closed doors or in the darkness, you know what I mean? So as soon as like eyes are on them, they act different. And that's what we need, is for them to start going, people are watching. You're not just going to be able to continue to do this, because it's like they've just been doing it for so long, because nobody's known like what to do. Everybody's been alone in it. And that's why community is so important, and to support each other. Like, where would you recommend people, like if, someone's just watching this for the first time and starting to understand it, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going through that same thing. Where would you recommend they find other people that they can communicate with?
Your number one asset before all others is going to be the people that are in the same court audience. We have a platoon size element in Napa County of wealthy, middle class, lower income. And when we're in the courtroom and we hear something along the same lines, we reach it out to that person. Those people are in your community. They're close by. They're going to know the same guardian ad litems, the same judges. That's your first line of defense right there. They may even be in court anyways to be there on that day. And they're going to understand it. So you'll have less effort that you got to go through to get them to understand. They're going to be like, oh, I know they did the same thing to me. Where other folks are going to be like, you're going to do your best to try to compress it, but it's so hard. And so other folks are going to understand. And so I highly recommend at the county level, they're the closest. Get interweave yourself with those other folks. There's going to be some people that are probably going to not be the ideal, and so you're going to have to use your best judgment. But you don't miss out on that, folks. Step outside the courtroom. Hey, how you doing? My name is such and such. I heard you in there. Can we exchange information? Maybe have coffee, a sandwich, whatever, and let's talk about this. I noticed that, and it's a wealth of information that can be exchanged with one another.
Amen. I love that. And so, and we can start to kind of wrap. How can people like support you in your endeavors?
Just keep an eye out there. Support me by echoing the information to one another. I go to great lengths to try to get this information. Just give it to somebody else. I'm here not just combating the people that are doing the harm, but unfortunately, there's some other people that have been harmed. They're now party to the harm to others. So don't do that. That ain't right. If you've been on the business end of the harm, don't exploit people. There's somebody on their way here right now who is actually going to be homeless pretty soon. And I'll be doing an interview with her. And man, you would not believe how many folks have got next to nothing, but they give that over to these people because they're desperate and they're hurting and they get done dirty. And it's just like, wow, that's a special kind of evil right there. If you know that pain and then you go do harm to somebody. So if you're even thinking about it, if you see it, say something, do something. We're here standing on business. I'm going to close with prayer for us right now. You started, so I'll close with it. I'm going to take a knee. Thank you, Father God, for the protection that you give us. We are here to do battle in your name. Yeah. We shall not go quietly into the night. We love you and we praise you for the gifts that you have given us, the love and the communion with other folks. We pray for those that are suffering, whether they know your name or they do not know your name, that you give them peace and you give them strength. Let them know that you are watching and that we are here fighting in your name on behalf of them and for these children, Father God. May you protect us. May you protect our children. And we do all things in your name. We praise you and we love you. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
Amen. And I'm just so glad that you, joined me again. And I look forward to bringing you back on when there's more news to share. And as you continue to go down this journey, and, I'm so proud of you, brother. You're doing an amazing job. And, I know this is going to help other families. So God bless you for what you're doing and for, just doing, what God's asked you to do. So it's such a blessing to have you. And again, I look forward to having you back. Do you want to share some of your socials? I can also put it in the description of the show, but how can people follow you?
Well, I just want to let y'all know I'm rocking and rolling. There's going to be a point where I may not be able to be here because what I'm asking of the court in the United States Department of Justice, my circumstance is exceptional. I've taken on a great deal of risk and danger to stand with other people. I made that promise, but it's difficult. But I'm making Honorable Bondi and Cash Patel and Janine Pirro and the others. They've assigned assistant U.S. attorneys, and I'm seeing movement on that front. And I'm holding firm out here. Like, it wouldn't make sense for me to be out here because of my circumstance, but I made that promise and I'm holding the line for the promise that I made. So if y'all want to check me out on the platform, my circumstance is chaotic, so I don't want to be famous. I'm not here for that, but I want to support people.
They can follow your journey.
Keep an eye on, pardon?
So they can follow your journey. You know what I mean? That's what it's all about, sharing the message.
Yes, ma'am. I've met some wonderful folks on here, Audra, and wow, I mean, they impress me. Mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, everybody, and it's an honor to see their resolve and their strength. And so support all of them. Support Audra's platform. You see my videos here. I apologize if I was using profanity back in the, it's rough, it hurts. And but you'll see the progression of it.
Yeah.
It's Johnny X-Ray 22 on TikTok. Watch Your Six Brother on X, and at the permission statement on on YouTube, on Facebook. It's and on Instagram. It's Vino Valley Ambassador. I gave up my life of a driver out there. Well, they kind of ripped it from me, but I'm in the fight now. But yeah, Vino Valley Ambassador is my platform on that one.
Awesome. Well,
but if y'all can look at the case, you can look up my cases. John Anaya versus County of Napa et al. There's one in Washington and there's one in the Eastern District of Virginia. I post information on the platform when we're having court. We're going to have court on Monday, the 12th, before they've actually sent my case back to the same judge that we started off with, which is very alarming. He's a defendant. 4 of the judges are defendants in my civil action preferred and my request to the DOJ to prefer criminal action against them. So it's scary because you got to go in front of these judges and they do like to get their run back, when you stand your ground. So in the county of Napa, you can actually attend by Zoom any of the court hearings. So we'll be posting those court dates for myself and Stephanie Johnson and Wendell Coleman and many of the other parents that are going in there and getting bludgeoned. So we humbly ask for people to watch, because you can watch from all over the world and the country in Napa. And so we'll post those court dates and the Zoom link and everything. If y'all can show up and do that for me and see this play out in real time, you won't believe it until you see it. It's bizarre. And
Amen.
Folks, make sure you get a record. Keep a record. Like it's you got to think outside the box, because what's been happening to me, I have a record, but I had to go to great lengths to achieve that. But now I have something, because it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And the DOJ, whistleblow, give them the information, allocate evidence, real evidence, and give it over to the DOJ so they can do something. Okay. If you see something, get that evidence and hand it over. Okay. God bless y'all.
Awesome. God bless you, brother. Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
Audra.
joining us.
And follow Audra's platform, The Eye of the Storm. If you're on my platform, go check out Audra on all of her. Hey, tell them yours too, Audra.
Yes, it's Eye of the Storm SD or Eye of the Storm across channels. So please, and that's where you're watching this, some of you, and follow him on his. And I look forward to having you back again soon as we, just follow your journey in this. So God bless you, brother.
You
and
too. Audra is one heck of a warrior, folks. She is like the personification of warrior, and God bless you for everything you do, Audra.
Thank you, brother. You too.
Thank you.
So thank you guys for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. Join me next time where I bring you more truth, love, light, a little bit of darkness in between, and all of the good things. God bless you guys. Take care.
Amen. Good night, Audra.
Good night.